चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरयेत्। ॐ गुरुर्ब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णुः गुरुर्देवो महेश्वरः गुरुः साक्षात् परं ब्रह्म तस्मै श्री गुरवे नमः। श्रुतिस्मृतिपुराणानाम् आलयं करुणालयं नमामि भगवत्पादं शङ्करं लोकशङ्करम्। ॐ सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। सर्वोपनिषदो गावो दोग्धा गोपालनन्दनः पार्थो वत्ससुधीर्भोक्ता दुग्धं गीतामृतं महत्।
धृतराष्ट्र उवाच धर्मक्षेत्रे कुरुक्षेत्रे समवेतायुयुत्सवः मामकाः पाण्डवाश्चैव किमकुर्वत सञ्जय। श्रीभगवानुवाच क्लैब्यं मास्मगमः पार्थ नैतत्त्वय्युपपद्यते क्षुद्रं हृदय दौर्बल्यं त्यक्त्वोत्तिष्ठ परन्तप। कर्मणैव हि संसिद्धिम् आस्थिता जनकादयः लोकसङ्ग्रहमेवापि सम्पश्यन् कर्तुमर्हसि। प्रकृतेः क्रियमाणानि गुणैः कर्माणि सर्वशः अहङ्कारविमूढात्मा कर्ताहमिति मन्यते। इन्द्रियस्यार्थे रागद्वेषौ व्यवस्थितौ तयोर्नवशमागच्छेत् तौ ह्यस्य परिपन्थिनौ। अर्जुन उवाच अथ केन प्रयुक्तोऽयं पापं चरति पूरुषः अनिच्छन्नपि वार्ष्णेय बलादिव नियोजितः। श्रीभगवानुवाच काम एष क्रोध एष रजोगुणसमुद्भवः महाशनो महापाप्मा विध्येनम् इह वैरिणम्। धूमेनाव्रियते वह्निः यथादर्शो मलेन च यथोल्बेनावृतो गर्भः तथा तेनेदमावृतम्। तस्मात् त्वम् इन्द्रियाण्यादौ नियम्य भरतर्षभ पाप्मानं प्रजहिह्येनं ज्ञानविज्ञाननाशनम्। इन्द्रियाणि पराण्याहुः इन्द्रियेभ्यः परं मनः मनसस्तु परा बुद्धिः यो बुद्धेः परसस्तु सः। एवं बुद्धेः परं बुद्ध्वा संस्थभ्यात्मानमात्मना जहि शत्रुं महाबाहो कामरूपं दुरासदम्।
Very nice, Rakesh. Your rhythm and is very good. No breaks. Thank you. Excellent. One thing I thought was we are in chapter 6, but our chanting mantras go only till chapter 3. Is that right?
Yes, Professor. Yeah, today I was talking with Pranav also. If we can add more, I can add more if we.
I mean, they are all very good, but maybe we can, since now I think by listening many times to 3, we have committed hopefully some of them to memory. Maybe we can look at, what was it, Pranav, 4 and 5 now?
Maybe we can do 4, 5, 6 together if there are not many.
Sure. Have I indicated which ones, the star ones, Mark?
Only till 3rd we covered that.
Acha. So, okay, so I should indicate those.
Like last time, so you can just tick mark the one which you.
Zarur. Yeah, okay, I will do that. Yeah, 4, 5, and 6, right? At least 4 and 5, let me get 2, and then 6 we are reading still. Okay, who is going to start? '28 we have finished, I think.
27.
27. We did 27.
25.
I can start 28.
Zarur. Okay, we have finished 27?
Yeah.
So, any questions up till this? Let's quickly review what 6. How has the theme of thinking been in 6? So from verse 10 onwards, the description of yoga itself was given. 10 to 16, 17, 18, 19. Then 20 onwards is description of the sort of fruits of what happens. Sort of like a Phalashruti. Yatra uparamati chittam, and then sukham atyantam yam labdva, etc. Then again little bit of practice, how to do. 25 shanaihi shanaihi uparamet, and then yato yato nischarya, again practice. And then, so this is so the perhaps a good way to understand 6 is from 10 onwards is instruction on yoga itself, but in the beginning there are more practical instructions. Then there is a shift where in some sense what is the fruit of this, right? What is the description of the state? Then switch back a little bit to practice. So we just came to the last one. Shanaihi Shanaihi Uparamet was again direct instruction of practice. Yato Yato Nischarati, etc. And then again now switching back to what is the phal. Prashanta Manasam Hyenam Yoginam. What does the yogi attain? Right? And that's it. And I think this is very important because if the for an aspirant, if the promise of this Sukham Uttamam is not there, logically, there should be no incentive to practice. Right? What do you think? Right? Why put yourself through all the torture of not enjoying the sense pleasures if there's nothing at the end of it? Right? You should ask. Right? Definitely, an aspirant can ask the teacher, what is the point of my putting myself through all this? I mean, when we go to any class, college, first thing that the students want to know is what is the job I will get when I finish the degree, right? Yes or no? Very rare student will say, I'm studying only for the sake of studying, right? And it's not an unreasonable question, don't you think? Even in our Subhashita, we say, Vidya dadati vinayam vinayat yati patratam. Patratvat dhanam apnoti dhanat dharmam tadas sukham. Right? Vidya also is not pursued without some goal in mind, even practical Vidya. What does that Vidya give? First, it gives humility. Unfortunately, this is very lacking. I wish this verse my students in college would imbibe. Because each of these aspects is lacking unfortunately in today's students. Vidya dadati vinayam. The purpose of learning is to give humility. Vinayat yati patratam. Through that humility, when we absorb the learning, competence arises. Patratvat dhanam apnoti. Money should be earned on the basis of competence. Dhanat dharmam tatas sukham. that money, when given in dharmic charity, gives pleasure. You see what a fantastic construction the simple verse has, and how it is betrayed so often in today's life. You think about it, right? How many people out there are making money based on competence, right? Let's list the top 10 billionaires in today's thing and see how many are truly actually based on any competence. And you'll see not many, right? A few. Right? And now that competence also, how was it obtained, right? So this is very useful exercise. And then what does one do with the money, right? Even if one earns less, but if one is using it in proper way, charity, that gives a great, this is actually a well-known fact. If you read all the studies on happiness, they say there are many calculations also. So they keep changing slightly the numbers. $59,000 a year, $75,000. Beyond that, earning more money is actually does not contribute to happiness. This is a well-documented scientific study. Okay. So up to a certain point, it is necessary. Beyond a certain point, it does not add anything, right? Then they say the greater thing of happiness is connection, and those who use it somehow to serve, to help another person. This was recognized in these 4 padas of a simple shlok, which is not even from the Veda or anything. This is a Subhashita. It's just a general, good, nice spoken verse. So this is the power of the Sanskrit language and the power of our culture and civilization, which if reaped correctly, it leads to great bliss. Although it may be sometimes contrary to the worldly wisdom in the year 2020. Right? This is there. Although wisdom is there even in 2020, if one looks from the right places. Okay, anyway, digression, but nevertheless, so we are seeing now the phal. So the point is that there is some fruit, some greater delight that is attained through this yoga, which justifies more than justifies the effort needed on the path, right? See, when a student comes to join a course in our university, first thing, we advertise, a lot of universities advertise, these are the fantastic placement you will get. This is the average salary that you will gain, a student graduating with your degree will get. Yes or no? Right? Don't you agree? That's not wrong. It's not wrong. Because in all of our life, whatever we do, we expect some fruit, right? So this is a reasonable motivation. I say, okay, when you take this class, you will get this salary. So then we also have to show that there are others who have gone before you who have attained. That also Bhagavan pointed out in one of the verses earlier, if you remember in the Gita. He says, many have gone and attained my state, right? So this is what Bhagavan is doing. He's just teaching like an instructor to Arjuna that first of all, you do all this stuff, there is something. Prashanta manasam hyenam yoginam sukham uttamam. The bliss supreme. Upaiti shanta rajasam brahma bhuta kalmasha. So again and again, the reason why he intersperses in the middle of instruction, because if you only give instruction, student will lose faith. Student may not keep the interest, right? Every now and then I have to say placement has recently just come with the number $70,000 at least per annum is the starting salary. Oh no, actually with masters 80, 90,000, right? 95% of students in the graduating class get placed, right? And you will of course be in the 95%, right? We have to keep reinforcing the fruit at the end of the thing. This is what Bhagavan is doing. Very obviously, very brilliant. The ultimate psychotherapist, psychologist has written this. So, so now, so again, Bhagavan has told us what is the employment opportunities at the end of this chapter. With 27, now 28, Mahesh will give, right?
Right, that is an interesting analogy. I like that. Yunjan nebam sadatmanam Yogi Bigata Kalmasaha Sukhena Brahma Isparsa Matyantam Sukhaman Masnutehe.
Yunjan evam. So Yunjan is yoking in this way, right? Yunjan evam sadatmanam, always the self, yogi, this yogi, vigata kalmashaha, free from sin, sukhena, brahma samsparsham, through or with great ease. Sukhena in this thing, yeah, is great, easily is correct translation. With facility. Brahma samsparsham, contact with Brahman. Atyantam sukham, infinite bliss. Ashnute, literally eats or achieves. So, Yunjanevam sadatmanam. In this way, yoking himself always. Yogi vigata kalmasha, sinless yogi. Sukhena brahma samsparsham atyantam sukham ashnute. So, in this way, meaning as described in verses 1 through 27, with obviously the emphasis on the practical aspects and rid of all impediments. So let us read the commentary. Thus integrating the self according to the sequence of steps already set forth. Exactly. This was my interpretation as well, that the 1 to 27, the yogi, rid of all impediments to yoga, vigata papaha, sukhena, anayasena, beautiful word, anayasa means effortlessly, right? Easily, sukhena. So that's the correct translation. See, this is where a great commentary helps. Sukha appears in both padas, third and fourth. Sukhena brahma samsparsham, and then sukham atyantam sukham ashnute. But the meaning of sukham is slightly different, quite a bit different in both contexts. And so Bhagavan Shankaracharya's explanation is, crystal clear. Sukhena anayasena, brahma samsparsham, brahmana parena samsparsho yasya tat brahmasa. This is beautiful. Again, this is kind of my understanding, which may be not complete, of something called nirukta, the etymology of words. How do we, so in Sanskrit, there's a very special, beautiful way where we explain the etymology of a word. So this is an example of that. What is Brahma Samsparsham? Brahmana parena samsparshaha yasya tat Brahma Samsparsham. Right? Sukham atyantam. Antam atitya vartate iti atyantam. That which exists beyond the end. So the endless. Right? That which exceeds all finite. Antam atitya vartate iti atyantam. Utkrishtam niratishayam sukham asnute vyapnoti. Again, another fantastic characteristic of Bhagavan Sri Shankaracharya is that he has both Anubhava and the Smriti Purana, right? This is very difficult to find. All characteristics in one guru. Definitely in 2020, very difficult. So that's why it is better to hark back to the ones who have gone before, right? So many people write, I mean, even today, Some people send me, but I wrote this translation of Bhagavad Gita. I would like to share with you my translation. It's nice, it's okay. God takes all offerings, undoubtedly, they say, right? But the hallmark of a great translation, timeless translation, is the combination of Anubhava and the deep knowledge of Smriti Purana. This combination is not easy to get. And so only that authority, the stamp of authority of Anubhava, it rings through all the commentary, right? This is not somebody who's talking about something that they don't know. They know this stuff cold. They know this stuff intimately. They're living this stuff. Thus, they can write like this, right? And not only that, there are people who have Anubhava also, but they do not simultaneously know how to trace from the Ved, from the Shruti, from the Smriti, from the Puran, the entire wealth of our literature, to draw the traces, to select the appropriate verses and to string it. This is not a, I will say, it took me a long time to appreciate it. Although intuitively I knew this was the authoritative translation, to understand the depth of the translation itself took time. Normally, when people first take this translation, they will not find it that easy to read, in fact. Correct? There are very long objection passages, commentary, right? So to get the juice of the commentary also takes some experience, some understanding. And so this digression I'm giving you is to tell you why this is such a deep. You can read many translations. There are numerous translations of the Gita, but the height of this is because of this combination that you see. Anyway, 29.0, introduction to verse 29. Idanim yogasya yat phalam brahma ekatva darshanam, brahmaikatva darshanam. Sarva samsara vicheda karanam tat pradarsyate. Now is elucidated the fruit of yoga. I told you again and again, this is like a phalashruti, like you hear in these, in many shlokas. So this is again phala. What is the phalam? Perception of the unity of Brahman. Brahma ekatva darshanam. Sarva samsara vicheda karanam. The cause of the cessation of all empirical life. Tat pradarshati. That is now elucidated. Achha. Who is next?
I can go next.
Zarur.
Sarvabhutasthamatmanam sarvabhutani chatmani ikshate yoga yuktatma sarvatra samdarshanah.
Very nice. Beautiful. Well said. Sarva bhutastham atmanam. Seeing oneself in all other beings. Sarva bhutastham. Established in all beings. Sarva bhutani cha atmani. And seeing all beings in oneself, in a way. In the self. Ikshate. He who sees. Yoga yuktatma, and a special one who sees, the one who is yoked through the practice of yoga. Sarvatra samadarshanaha, seeing the same everywhere. Equality of vision. This should hark back to the one already he has mentioned, right? He who sees, learned Brahmin, Gavi, Hastini, cow, elephant, Swana, the dog, Swapaka, dog eater, outcast, he who sees same in everyone. This one is considered the yogi, correct? Sarva bhutastham atmanam. Beholds the self in all beings. Sarva bhutani cha atmani, and all beings in the self. Ikshate yoga yuktatma sarvatra samadarshana. This sees this one, the one who is yoked by yoga, seeing everything. Now, how does this arise? So this is a good thing for everyone to ponder. How is the beholding the self in all beings? So let us approach this in two ways. First, we can approach this intellectually, correct? From the Buddhist standpoint, if we are convinced of this, then it will make it easier, don't you think, to strive on the path of yoga, correct? What do you say? So now, in Taittiriya Upanishad, it is already said that we observe this Panchakosha 5-sheath model, correct? What does the 5-sheath model say? Outwardmost sheath is Annamaya Kosha, Pranamaya Kosha, then Manomaya Kosha, Vijnanamaya Kosha, Anandamaya Kosha, and Atma is within this, correct? We have this model. In the path of yoga, we said that there is something called pramana, valid means of cognition. Okay? It is one of the vrittis, one of the turnings of the mind. But remember that the vrittis are two types. Klishta, klishta. As long as the mind's turnings can be made aklishta greater proportion of the time, then this yogic vision of Samyak Darshana permeates our perception more and more, right? Correct? One in complete Viyoga is all the time waking state, all the perception is having klishta, tainted in some way. First taint being avidya, correct? Anyway, so now we have this 5 Panchakosha model. Let us take another human being, correct? So now if Panchakosha model applies to me, correct? First of all, let us take Annamaya Kosha. Does everybody agree we have a body? Yeah. Everyone agrees, right? Every day we identify with the body, we wash the body, feed the body. There's no doubt on that plane, correct? Okay. Now, let's take next one, Pranamaya Kosha. Let us say that you do not have currently experience of Pranamaya Kosha. Fine, no problem. You can be honest with yourself. You may have experience, you may not have experience. That is your decision, right? Nobody is going to impose that on you in this program. So you say, yes, I have experience of Pranamaya Kosha. There's no problem, right? That means you're in agreement with the Panchakosha model. Yes. Let us say that you're not in agreement, that your direct experience does not show you the existence of Pranamaya Kosha, correct? Nevertheless, yoga says there are 3 types of praman: pratyaksha, anumana, agama, correct? Now, agam is scripture, and I'm quoting to you Taittiriya Upanishad. So, you must accept something from the scripture, correct? So, provisionally, the advice is, even if it's not in my direct experience, I accept this as a model, correct? Now, we will apply anuman. If it applies to me, must it not be true that every other human being also must have the same model? Is it possible that it's not, right? Can a black guy have a different model? Can a white guy have a different Panchkosh? Not possible. Not possible, correct? They must also have same Panchakosh, right? This is Anuman. Now you understand how we apply Praman in yoga? Practically, this is how we apply. So, if it is not in your realm of experience, you must pick the appropriate Agam, apply Anuman. Now, if the Atma at the core there must be some Atma at the core, correct? Now, the last piece, which is the Dvaita-Advaita difference, will arise. Objection can be, what if the Atma at the core of every bhut is not the same? Is it possible? Can there be a solution to this conundrum in which, yes, the Panchakosha applies, it applies to me, by inference it applies to all, and therefore there is an Atma inside everyone. But how do we know that that Atma is the same? Isn't that true?
Yeah.
This doubt can arise, right? Okay. So now I want you to take for and against, debate. Why is for correct? Why is against correct? And you'll be judged by the superiority of your argument.
We can apply the principle of induction.
Okay.
If Annamaya Kosha is same and the Pranamaya Kosha is same, so thereby going inwards, the Atma within has to be same for all.
No, but I mean, I don't feel my body is the other person's body, right? There is diversity in that sense. Won't you agree? Why should that diversity not carry all the way through to the innermost?
But that diversity is very superficial. But if talking about the Annamaya Kosha, the essential functioning of the body, the essential systems running in the body, they are same across all humans on the planet, if talking about only humans. So the diversity is very superficial.
Okay. Anyone else?
And in terms of why it feels different, I think it's the different mind associated with different bodies that just associates with that body and is not able to, grasp the concept that it's the same.
Very interesting, Siva. This is an interesting angle on it. Okay. Could you repeat little loudly?
No, I mean, like, it's just expanding on Raci's point. It's like, if the reason is like we feel that this is our body, and why not we feel the same for other bodies? It's the mind that's different. That's what I was going on. I don't know, because different minds have different tendencies and samskaras, and that's why it's not able to identify outside of the particular body.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, Raci, what you are, maybe when we say Annamaya Kosha, we have to be precise whether we mean, so remember that there is both microcosmic and macrocosmic manifestation, right? So like we say, Jagrat Avastha is for Jivatma, but Vaishvanara is the sum total of the Jagrat Avasthas of all Jivatmas, correct? Right? Although we can conceptualize that, yet when we say body, we usually mean only the individualized body, right? Wouldn't you agree? Right? And so we're getting to a more interesting nuance that Shiva is saying, which is that it's the mind's limitation. Is that right? Did I understand that right?
Yes, that's what I was trying to.
Okay. All right. So we have one theory, one standpoint of Raci's, which is that by analogy, induction, if the one kosha is applicable to all, the last essence must also be applicable to all, and hence is the same. Right? Fair enough. Reasonable. Any further objections or support?
I have trouble understanding the question itself, because we're talking about Atma being different across people, but Atma is something which is arrived at by taking away everything else, right? So it is devoid of every attribute. If it has no attribute, how can it be different? I mean, how can we say if it's the same or it's different across people?
So good. So then there is a third option that you cannot decide, is it same or different, right?
I mean,
so there are three options now. One is it is same. Two, it is different. Three, it is neither same nor different. Third category. Is that what you're advancing?
Yeah, probably.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, because this is a genuine problem, right? So how are you going to choose? quite honestly, the very logical approach that all the jivas are different is the Dvaita philosophy, right? It's a legitimate approach acknowledged in our, it's an Astic approach, right? It's not Nastika, right? Correct? Don't you agree?
See.
All that of Vallabhacharya, Ramanujacharya, Madhavacharya is all, there are many, they all have authoritative translations of Bhagavad Gita, correct? There are 3 different, what I'm saying is, when we understand a particular path, as we choose a certain path, the greatest depth and acceptance and love and embracing thing comes when we also understand the other paths, right? Correct?
Yes.
So at a certain stage, right, you will come to see that there is nothing wrong in the Dvaita philosophy up to a point. Up to a point. Correct? Right? So in a way, we may say that like an onion, there are different layers of, you may say, spiritual evolution and growth, right? And when you look from the innermost point, even if you have deep faith, which I recommend, Shraddha in Advaita is good, right? And yet the beauty of that is through that, from that standpoint, one can accept and understand and thus subsume the other viewpoint. Correct? The viewpoint that rejects the other, correct, must only stem because it doesn't fully understand it at some level. Right? So this is not, of course, a question that can be answered in one evening, right? But I wanted to, and I hope it was useful, I wanted to make you exercise your intellection and your personal experience in a way using the yoga techniques, correct? I hope that was useful. As I said, I don't want to give a definitive, now we are moving into slightly more advanced practice. You have all demonstrated that you have great Shraddha. You have all demonstrated you have faith in the Advait, right? But slowly, as you strengthen your faith and as you practice, the question can arise. Samshaya will always arise, right? As long as till all the samshayas are cleared, right? They can arise. They can arise from you or they can arise from somebody else also, right? In our discussions with somebody, one may say, now, of course, one can always take the standpoint that, okay, this is all I know. This is what my guru says, and I will follow that. And this is perfectly reasonable and legitimate and a wise way sometimes, because sometimes you don't want to get into arguments with anyone and everyone, right? On the other hand, there is value also to clarifying in one's own mind, why is this interpretation appealing to me intuitively, whereas the other one is not appealing to me. Right? So that is more like a home exercise. What do you think? Huh?
So, Dr. Shankar, it's confusing to me actually. Are you emphasizing on the practices of yoga to train your mind so that it can drive towards that direction, or?
Sorry, this is Durgesh ji?
Ji.
So I am emphasizing, yes. So there are 2 things. First of all, Bhagavan Sri Krishna has given some very direct instructions on how to practice yoga, right?
Yeah.
In this chapter. What I'm saying is that this verse at 29, how do we understand this verse? They can understand it at different levels. One is, I can take, this is Bhagavan's statement, it is true, right? Case closed. No problem. That is correct. That is good. I have respect for somebody with that level of faith also. second question. Somebody, you are having this discussion and somebody says, well, but because we all have intellectual mind, we want to create some logical reasoning. We want to give an explanation. Say, okay, Bhagavan said this, but how do I understand it? Correct? Right? So then I was trying to give you the way we understand is through apply the very principles of yoga philosophy. Right? So that's why I brought the idea of Pramana and their Pratyaksha Anumana. So what I'm trying to say is these are living logical approaches. They are not just in some dead sutra, right? When you study the text, one should deploy these techniques, is what I'm trying to say. Does that make sense?
Yep.
It is only if we make them living will that sutra itself live in 2020, right? Otherwise, it will just be some dead thing in a palm leaf, right? But if tomorrow you go out and you discuss somewhere, you're invited. When 10 years from now, you're invited to give talk on Bhagavad Gita, right? Then you can say, no, these are not dead things. These are living things, right? They're living things because they're principles. You can apply them. And we've just forgotten because we probably took, we think logic means it has to be in some Western context. No, nobody said logic. No, nobody has a domain on logic, a copyright on logic, right? There is a logic in the Yoga Sutra, and this is the logic. So we applied the logic and we came to a conundrum, right? And the conundrum is important because this is not the only commentary on the Bhagavad Gita. As I mentioned to you, there are famous Dvaita commentaries, Ramanujacharya, Madhvacharya, Vallabhacharya. I don't know if Vallabhacharya has a commentary, but definitely he has a philosophy, right? Now, so therefore, to your own mind, to satisfy the samshaya and to also probably build a healthy understanding of the other viewpoints, so that one can, even in a friendly way, point out why you follow this approach rather than the other approach. Right? It will be useful, I think. Huh? So as a home, that's why I gave it as a home exercise. And you can ask me, next time you can ask me questions based on this. Okay. I'll do my best to answer. Sometimes I might have opened up a problem that is too hard for me to solve. I don't know. But I thought it would be fun.
Can I just say something?
Zarur.
So yeah, this question of whether this one soul or different, sometimes I feel it's a matter of about expanding your consciousness and identifying yourself with others. So if I may say, most of the time what happens is that we identify ourselves with our physical body. Mm-hmm. So if something good happens to us, we feel happy. If something bad happens to us, we feel sad. Mm-hmm. But there are some glimpses where we can see that it's possible to expand our consciousness beyond. The simplest example is, for example, if my son is happy, sometimes I feel happy. Yeah. And that's the instance where I started identifying myself with him, I think. So for that brief moment, probably I expanded my consciousness. Yeah. So if you could expand your consciousness to much broader, and then most of the time this thing lasts for a very small interval. Yeah, he's happy, I'm happy, but that lasts for 1 minute. After that, I'm myself. And say a little bit more. Sometimes it's beyond your family members also. Right. So let's say if India wins World Cup, I feel so excited, even though I have nothing to do with the Indian cricket team, because at that time, probably I identified myself with the team itself. Yeah. I'm thinking that the cricket team is me, so that's why I'm feeling so happy.
Right.
So I think that if we can do this, and probably that's the way you can experience that all souls are the same. If you could expand your consciousness to everywhere and everything and permanently.
That's very nice.
That's what I feel sometimes. But easier said than but my point is to say that we all experience glimpses of that expanding our consciousness beyond our physical body. Right. I think probably that acts as an evidence that maybe we are all the same.
That's beautiful. I love it. Very nice. Thank you. I think you said it so nicely, in a very simple way. Beautiful. Yes. So this was useful. The question did prod you to articulate that. Thank you. That's very nice. Right. It's also the reason why, you're very right. We cultivate also a collective conscience. Think of it that way, right? When something bad happens also, right? Empathy that one feels is an example of it, a reflection of that. Correct? Wouldn't you say? Even if it's not directly happening to you or your family, or so I would say, in fact, in response to this George Floyd thing, I wrote something to my students and I said, it's not a question, and please don't take this out of context. It's not a question of racism. It's a question of inhumanity. It's not a question what race I'm from or whatever. As one human being, can you do that to another human being? That's all. The base identity we all share as human beings, right? And so what upsets us is that an inhuman act against any human being should trouble us, right? That is the same expansion you're talking about in a different context, right? So you're right. We may rejoice at the joys of others, and that again is a reflection of this unity that you're saying. However, I'll give you another homework assignment. Suppose we expand our consciousness as a beautiful state. Then I always wondered this, can we take the sorrow of all humanity and hold it for an instant in our head? Something to think about, right? Or also probably positively, one should think, what about the joy of all of humanity? That would also be an interesting experience, right? Yeah. Anyway, thank you, Pavan. That is very nice. Acha, so should we try one more verse before time is up?
So just one quick question on that.
Today was a fantastic class. We've only done 1 or 2 verses. Okay.
Dr. Sankar, just one quick question.
Yeah, please.
So the last question that you mentioned about the joy of all human beings or the sorrow of all human beings,
right?
Is that closely related to the Vaishvanara, that experience? Or
yes, in a sense, yes, in the waking state, right? You can also have joyous and sorrowful experiences in the dream state also. We can add that one also. But you see now, does it now make sense why the yogi, they say, is unaffected by joy, by pleasure or pain, right? In a sense, now it makes sense that unless the mind becomes immutable, unchanged due to those, one cannot encompass the entire consciousness. Correct? If we keep on adding everybody's sorrow, in a sense, right, the little vessel cannot hold that much, right? But if the vessel is made bigger and bigger, right, correct, then it can hold, right? Another analogy, remember it says that just like when all the rivers pour into the sea, it does not change the level of the ocean or sea, right? So similarly, when that consciousness is expanded to a very large amount, even those fluctuations do not affect, right? So that in a way gives an indication of what the state of that yogic state. Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
right.
Dr. Sankar, I have a quick follow-up. Maybe it is expanding. So yeah, adding to Pawan's comment, he beautifully, actually, I was about to say, and he did, expanding the consciousness, and like you just mentioned, so expanding consciousness, so such a big ocean that nothing can shake, right? Equanimity of the mind.
Right.
So I wonder, so at one point when we were discussing with Swami Tyagananda, I think Tyagananda, Sarvapriyananda, one time, so he said that for the Brahmagyani, in the end, when he leaves the body, where the prana goes, and because we don't feel, I just feel the outer, right? Like at this point, well, I mean, Annamaya Kosa, not yet until Manmaya, Pranmaya, we still striving for that. And he was with a, with a suggestion, or with a point that Brahmagyan is expanded to the whole universe, so he has nothing, nowhere to go. His prana doesn't go anywhere. Like others, right, who are in a process of getting there. So some people's prana goes in different paths, right, different ways. And I like, okay, so you expand and you become all, right, basics of everything. And so you have nowhere to go, and then that is a level we striving, right? Yeah, intellectually, yeah, this makes sense, but yeah.
But it's good, because it's only when it starts to make sense intellectually will the firmness of resolve arise to follow the paths, right, outlined. Right, that's why I brought it up, right? So we can definitely read this verse 29 just superficially, and we can move on. 2, we can take it as Bhagwan's word, accept it as truth, and move on. 3 is we can subject it to some intellectual turning around, and then somehow bring it in conjunction, or bring it in concert with our experience, and that may strengthen more the faith. And we can also be aware that there may be other interpretations, and then how do we reconcile the faith that we have in our interpretation relative to those? That is a slightly more advanced topic.
Sure. Thank you.
Certainly. Acha. Is anyone going to take on 30?
I can go.
Please.
Vyomam pashyati sarvatra sarvam cha mai pashyati tasyaham na pranashyami sa che me na pranashyati.
Very nice. So, the result of this vision of unity, etasya atma ekatva darshanasya phalam uchyate. Yo mam pashyati sarvatra. He who sees me everywhere. Sarvam cha mai pashyati, and who sees everything in me. Tasya aham na pranashyami. Him I do not destroy, or he says, here he translates as lost. Na parokshatam gamishyami is what Bhagavan says. I don't send him into a state different from me. Correct? I draw him into me. Tasya aham na pranashyami, sacha mena pranashyati. And he does not distance himself, and in that sense does not also die, if you may say, because in the spiritual path, death is not leaving the body. Death is denying the self. Right? So he says, Bhagavan says, Ya iti, yaha mam pashyati vasudevam sarvasya atmanam sarvatra sarveshu bhuteshu sarvam cha brahmadi bhutajatam mai sarvatmani pashyati. So, you see the very word Vishnu. What does the word Vishnu mean? Vishnu means all pervading. Literally, that's what it means. Even if you didn't think he's a god, Vishnu means that which pervades everything. Okay? So, therefore, obviously that which pervades everything is everywhere. Right? Therefore, if one accepts that Bhagavan Sri Krishna is an incarnation of this Vishnu, then what he says is true. He has identified himself with that all-pervading consciousness. And he says, he who sees me everywhere. And also, he recognizes that this Vishnu is larger than the largest. So it contains everything within it. Right? That is the second part. He says, beholds everything in me. That is, there is nothing in the sense perception that we can perceive that lies outside. In our set theory, it is a superset. Right? All sets lie within it. There's no set that can lie outside the set. Right? And also, right. Then, tasya, so Vasudeva, all Brahmadi Bhuta Jatam, those that have come from the source creation Brahma, creator, see in me. Tasya evam atma ekatva darshinaha aham ishvaraha na pranashyami. I as the Lord, I do not destroy him. Na parokshatam gamishyami. I do not send him away from me. Sacha mena pranashyati. Sacha vidvan mama vasudevasya na pranashyati na paroksha bhavati. He is not different from me. Tasya cha mama cha atma ekatvat. Because of the unity or identity of the self of his and mine. Okay. Now, this is such a beautiful concept and unique, I feel, to the limit, my limited knowledge of any religion. God directly saying, you're not different from me, you're not far from me, I'm not going to send you far away from me, because in the core, you and I are the same, right? Mama vasudevasya na pranashyati na paroksha bhavati tasya cha mama cha atma ekatvat sva atma hi nama atmanah prakashah priyah eva bhavati. For he and I as self are one, and one's self is always dear to one. Sva atma hi nama atmanah prakashah eva bhavati. Again, Bhagavan, our Yajnavalkya said to his wife, Maitreyi, the wife is also loved for the sake of the self, with a capital S. Husband is also loved for the sake of the self. The child is also loved for the sake of the self only, right? If that same spark of unity was not there between one and that, right, where would that love arise from? Right? So this is in fact reflecting, that verse of Yajnavalkya is reflecting what Pavan intuitively indicated at, right? That sharing of joys. Yasmat cha aham eva sarvatma ekatva darshi iti etat purva shlokartham samyak darshanam anudhya tat phalam mokshaha abhidiyate. Restating the sense of the preceding verse. Right perception, in other words, samyak darshi, ekatva darshi, that the perceiver of the unity of the self of all is myself, its consequence or liberation is now affirmed. So that leads to. So we are at time. So let us stop with 30 and then we'll pick up 31 next time. Any questions on these verses?
I haven't follow-up question on your analogy, Professor. So you said like when we put into a situation where we have to accept all sorrows or happiness.
Mm-hmm.
So there are two. I feel like there are two possible solutions. Like one is to make the vessel bigger, or we can make the thing smaller, like whatever we see. So
yes.
What? I don't know if. Like what should we strive for, or what is the possible solution? Like how do
They're both the same. They're both the same. They are both the same. Because it's the dynamic range, small to big, that matters. It's not the absolute value.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
It's the ratio of the two that matters. So as a yogi, in your daily practice of yoga, if those joys and sorrows do not fluctuate the individual Jivatma's mind, correct? It attains the same state as the Paramatma's mind, which is so large that again nothing fluctuates it, right? So it is, you hit the nail on the head very beautifully. But I'm saying that there are not two different approaches. If you minimize one's own sorrows and joys within one's mind, that automatically expands the consciousness to the state that you're talking about.
Okay.
I really liked your question because it pointed out a very nice subtle point that they are exactly the same thing. Thank you. Brilliant question. You're a good group. You're always entertaining and perceptive and wonderful. So today is Dakshinayan start off, and Amavasya also. It is called Shanishwara Amavasya. Very nice day, special day. So it's a jolly satsang as always. And I hope you did not mind my long digression, but I thought this is more practical way of studying the Bhagavad Gita, right? So that we don't just jump over verse to verse, but we actually spend some time and apply the tools and make it more, it may make it harder a little bit, but I think it's more meaningful at the end of the day. Right? Achha? So if there are no further comments, I will say
one more question.
Huh? Yes.
What does it mean by saying denying the self is that death is denying the self?
Yes. Right. So indeed. So every human being has to, at some point in their life, pass through the darkest, deepest point of despair. Okay? And that deepest point of despair is nothing other than the point where you think you're going to lose your faith. Okay? Nothing else is as bad. Okay? It is only when one successfully conquers that point where everything in the external world happens contrary to what you have learned and challenges your faith. Okay? If one can cross that point, then there's no problem. And everyone must cross that point because we think our faith is very strong, correct? We may think your faith is very strong. But till the point the pranas leave the body, there are many experiences to be had. Correct? Right? Very challenging experiences sometimes, very delightful experiences sometimes. But the question again always comes to the end is, if my faith is strong enough, I can cross any hurdle. Right? But the day I lose my faith, and I don't mean just Hindu faith even, it is Shraddha, right? In a very generic sense. This applies to people of other denominations also. But the Isha Upanishad said this in a very beautiful thing. It says, Asurya namat tan lokan andhena tamasavrataha. So these sunless worlds are the ones that who go to Ye Atmahana Jana, the ones who destroy the self or deny the self. The ones who deny the Atma, right, they are said to go to the sunless worlds, right? And so that's what Bhagavan is saying here, that I do not, the one who sees me and everything and everyone in me, I do not destroy him. I do not banish him to such a world. If you look at all the Puranas, you look at all the great Asuras, right? At the end, when they are killed, they say, oh Lord, I see you are the light. I see the truth you're trying to say. In that sense, they are saved from those sunless worlds, right? As long as they keep denying and fighting God, right? They are in the sunless worlds. And fighting God is fighting oneself, because if at the core of one is nothing but that same Lord, right? Let's suppose, I'll give you an example. Let's suppose I have a very, very stressful set of external circumstances and I get very angry with everyone around me, right? I get very angry with everyone. I get very angry with myself. I get very angry with my faith because it has not helped me at all. Suppose I come to the state of mind, and you can cross that state of mind and do your anushtanam, right? Then you are truly a well-tempered sadhak. You see what I'm saying? Because you have glimpsed into that sunless world, acknowledged its existence, and chose not to go in there. Right? Does that make sense? And definitely the world is very challenging. Definitely there are some very difficult challenges that we can face. Yes or no? Right? It's not smooth sailing all the time. And it's sometimes not clear what this faith is giving us. Right? Sometimes it's not clear. Right? And that is when our very habits, our very anushtanams, those are the ones that save us. Right? Because they allow that moment to pass and wisdom to return. Right? And then we see the value. Does that make sense? I hope people don't have to stand on the threshold or portal of those dark worlds, but sometimes it happens, right? Yeah. Okay, so let me say Shanti Mantram. We'll meet again. Huh? Very nice discussion today. Om Tachamyora Vrinimahe Gatum Yajnayam Gatum Yajnapataye Daivihi Swastirastunaham Swastirmanushebhyah Urdhvam Jigatu Bheshajam Shanno Astu Dvipadehe Sham Chatushpade Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Namaste everyone. Thank you.